October 20th, 1944. Red Beach, Palo, Leyte. Just after first light, the sea is gray and restless, chopped by propellers, wakes and shell bursts. Landing craft slam forward through smoke that smells of fuel, salt and cordite. Men crouch low behind steel ramps, rifles clutched tight, faces wet with spray and sweat, listening to the drumbeat of naval guns rolling in from offshore. Every few seconds the horizon flashes white, then orange, then black again on the beach. Coconut palms bend under the concussion. Sand jumps. Mud spits upward. Somewhere inland, a machine gun starts, stops, and starts again. The sound thin at first, then suddenly close enough to make shoulders tighten inside soaked uniforms. American soldiers of the 6th Army come in wave after wave, boots slipping, radios held high, engineers dragging gear through surf that fights every step. Navy coxswains shout over engines. Signal flags snap. Above them, aircraft cross in layered patterns. Some climbing, some diving, some circling like hawks over a field that has not stopped moving since dawn. And in that noise, in that confusion, in that violence, one fact is already beginning to cut through the smoke. This is not a raid. This is not another isolated island assault. This is the return to the Philippines. For months, Japanese commanders had watched the American advance across the Pacific and made their judgments. They respected American industry. They feared American naval power. They knew what carrier airstrikes could do. But many still saw American land command as blunt, inexperienced, too dependent on machines, too slow once forced into jungle and mountains. In their map rooms, some believed the decisive test would expose that weakness. They were about to meet a different kind of campaign, far offshore. The invasion armada stretches beyond easy counting. Warships, transports, supply vessels, escorts. A floating city of steel and planning, all synchronized around a single objective. Naval bombardment had opened the door. Air power had hammered runways and shipping. Now the ground forces were coming ashore to hold what the sea and sky had torn open. This was the shape of the American answer. And on this morning it moved with a coordination that was easy to miss if you stared only at the surf and blood and chaos at the waterline. A radio operator drops to one knee in wet sand and starts relaying positions. An officer with binoculars points toward a tree line and calls for fire adjustment. Engineers mark lanes through obstacles while medics crawl toward the first wounded. Amphibious tractors grind inland carrying ammunition, wire, mortar rounds, and men who have not yet fired a shot but already know the day will be longer than any briefing promised. Then he comes ashore. General Douglas MacArthur steps into the surf at Leyte, wading through water and spray with his staff and Philippine leaders nearby. A scene that will become one of the most remembered images of the Pacific War. Around him, the invasion is still in motion, still dangerous, still unfinished. This is not theater for the men pinned down ahead. They can hear rounds cracking over the shallows. They can smell burning brush and explosive residue. But symbolism matters in war. And everyone on that beach understands what this moment means. He had promised to return. Now he is here. And with him comes not just an American general, but an entire combined force built to break Japan's hold on the islands piece by piece. In Japanese headquarters, reports begin arriving in fragments. Landings on Leyte, multiple beaches, heavy naval presence, strong air cover, not a feint, not a minor thrust, a major commitment. Some officers remain confident, even sharp-tongued in their assessments of the men now directing the assault. Let the Americans come deeper, they think. Let them stretch supply lines. Let them fight inland where roads vanish and rain swallows momentum. Confidence is easy in the first reports of any invasion. On Leyte, the men at the front do not speak in theories. They speak in distances, sectors, ammunition counts, and landmarks that can disappear in smoke. A squad pushes past a shattered hut. A sergeant pulls 2 men into cover and points them toward a ditch line. A naval gun salvo lands beyond the palms, and the earth shakes under every knee and elbow pressed into the ground. Somewhere behind them, officers are already planning the next movements inland. Somewhere beyond the horizon, admirals are calculating the Japanese response at sea. Somewhere overhead, pilots search for targets that could threaten the beaches before noon. Ground, naval, and air power are no longer separate stories. They are converging here on this strip of Philippine coast, under fire, in real time, and far from the surf, behind desks and maps. Men who mocked American command have just begun to discover what they actually face. The first day on Leyte does not end with silence. It ends with engines, gun flashes, shouted coordinates, and the hiss of rain moving in over broken ground. By nightfall, the beaches are crowded with men, vehicles, ammunition stacks, fuel drums, bulldozers, field radios, and stretcher lines. The surf still glows at intervals when distant guns fire offshore. Wrecked craft lie half buried where they were hit. Engineers keep working in darkness, hands on rope, steel matting, and explosives, widening exits from the beach before the mud hardens into a trap of its own. The American foothold is shallow, but it is real, and it is growing. Inside command tents lit by shaded lamps, maps are weighted with helmets and canteens. Staff officers speak in low, clipped voices over the drone of generators. Reports from forward battalions come in unevenly. Some units moved faster than expected. Others met pockets of resistance in coconut groves and hamlets along the coast road. The land itself is already becoming an enemy. Wet fields, narrow tracks, flooded streams, and brush that swallows movement after 10 yards. Yet the pattern holds. Naval guns answer requests from shore. Aircraft strike routes inland. Ground units secure and expand the lodgment. The machine is not perfect. Nothing in war is, but it is connected. Orders move. Fire support follows. Supplies land. More men come ashore. That is what Japanese planners had underestimated. In Manila and farther north, Japanese senior commanders read the invasion not as a local emergency, but as the opening of the battle they had expected for months. General Tomoyuki Yamashita, newly assigned to command Japanese forces in the Philippines, studies the situation with the cold attention of a man who knows the stakes. He understands that once the Americans secure major lodgements and airfields, the balance will tilt hard and fast. He also knows he does not command a force built for easy maneuver against a massive amphibious army backed by sea and air supremacy. The men under him are spread across islands, short on transport, short on fuel, and increasingly vulnerable to attack before they even reach the battlefield. Still, orders go out. Reinforcements must move toward Leyte. The Americans are to be contested inland, delayed, bled, and if possible, thrown back before they can consolidate. Elsewhere, Japanese naval leaders see a chance, perhaps the last great chance, to strike at the invasion fleet and break the landing by force. Plans are activated that will bring major fleet units into battle from multiple directions. It is a bold design on paper, dangerous in execution, and born from desperation as much as doctrine. On Leyte, no one on the ground can see the full shape of what is coming. They feel it only as pressure. An infantry platoon advances at dawn through waist-high grass, silvered with rain. Boots sink with each step. Rifles are wrapped in strips of cloth to keep mud from the actions. A lieutenant checks his compass, looks toward a church tower in the distance, then signals his men left when machine gun fire snaps across the field from a concealed position near a dike. They hit the ground hard. Mortar rounds begin to fall. First long, then shorter. Dirt and water slap across helmets. A forward observer crawls to a better angle. presses a handset tight against one ear, and starts calling corrections. Minutes later, shells from supporting artillery crash into the tree line. The machine gun goes silent. The platoon rises and moves again. Slower now, every face tight, every shadow suspect. This is not the clumsy advance Japanese officers had imagined in private remarks. American land commanders in the Philippines are not fighting alone. They are fighting with destroyers offshore, carrier aircraft overhead, engineers behind them, and an industrial flow of material crossing the ocean by the hour. A battalion stalled by resistance can call for fire. A road cut by flooding can be repaired. A position identified from the air can be hit before an assault goes in. Coordination does not remove fear, confusion, or casualties, but it multiplies force. And on Leyte, it begins to show. At Tacloban and nearby objectives, American units push to secure key ground and facilities that will support the next stage. Airfields matter, roads matter, port access matters. Every acre taken is not just terrain, it is logistics. And logistics, in this campaign, will decide how long each side can keep fighting at all. Japanese troops dig in, regroup, and prepare counterattacks. They know the ground better. They know the weather will worsen. They know jungle, swamp, and mountain trails can break clean plans into fragments. Their resolve is real. Their officers are not laughing on the front lines now. Beyond the beaches, beyond the rain clouds, warships are turning toward each other in the dark. The next blow will not fall only on land. Before sunrise, the sea east of the Philippines is already alive with signals, bearings, and fear. In combat information centers, men lean over radar scopes in dim red light, headphones pressed tight, pencils moving across grease boards. On open bridges, lookouts scan black water cut by white wakes, every distant flash uncertain for one heartbeat, then terribly clear on the next. Engines throb through steel decks. Guns are loaded and trained. Somewhere ahead, Japanese fleet forces are closing. The invasion of Leyte has forced the battle everyone knew must come. Japanese naval commanders have committed powerful units in a complex operation aimed at the American landing. Their hope is simple, even if the plan is not. Strike the invasion fleet, smash transports and support ships, turn the beaches into a graveyard of stranded men and burning supplies. If the sea can be retaken even briefly, the American army on Leyte can be isolated and crushed. It is a plan built on audacity and timing. It collides with American coordination as the naval battles unfold across separate waters around the Philippines. The men fighting on Leyte know only fragments. Rumors pass from foxhole to foxhole and from beach depots to command posts. Big fleet action, carriers hit, enemy battleships sighted. Nothing is certain for long. The ground war does not pause to let anyone listen. Rain falls hard over inland trails, turning tracks into channels of brown water. Trucks bog to the axles. Engineers curse, lay matting, drag cables, and pull vehicles free one at a time while riflemen stand security in wet brush. Artillery crews strip shirts in the humidity, then work in mud to their knees, hauling shells by hand because the prime movers cannot get close enough. Fire missions continue anyway. A Japanese counterattack pushes against an American position near a road junction before dawn. The first warning comes from sentries hearing movement where there should be only rain. Then flares rise, shapes rush forward. Rifle fire cracks in sheets. A machine gun opens from the flank, stitching sparks from a disabled truck and driving men flat into the ditch. The American company commander, soaked to the skin and speaking into a mud-streaked handset, calls for artillery on pre-registered lines while runners move between platoons because radio contact is breaking in the weather. Minutes later, shells land so close the defenders feel the heat and pressure slap their faces. The attack falters, regroups, tries again. Mortars answer from the American rear. Naval gunfire is requested for suspected assembly areas farther out. That is the difference now, and Japanese officers at every level begin to feel it. An American unit does not need to win every exchange with rifle fire alone. If it finds resistance, it can pin, report, and pull in weight from somewhere else. A destroyer offshore, a battery inland, aircraft when weather opens. The battlefield is becoming connected in a way that turns local Japanese bravery into repeated losses. At sea, the Japanese fleet strikes hard in places and suffers heavily in return. American carriers and escort carriers launch and recover aircraft in punishing cycles. Destroyers charge against larger ships under fire. Cruisers trade salvos in narrow waters where confusion and courage matter as much as tonnage. It is not neat. It is not one battle, but many, linked by the same objective: protect Leyte. By the time clearer reports begin filtering back to shore headquarters, one truth stands above all others. The Japanese effort to destroy the invasion has failed. They have shown ferocity, and in some sectors, terrifying skill. But they have not broken the landings. The Americans still hold the beaches. Supplies still come in. Reinforcements still arrive. That failure changes everything on land. Yamashita and his subordinates can still fight, still reinforce, still inflict casualties. But the dream of collapsing the American invasion in its first critical days is slipping away. Every lost ship, every missed convoy, every transport delayed by air attack makes the problem worse. Men sent to Leyte arrive late, piecemeal, or not at all. Ammunition gets scarce. Food gets scarcer. The terrain remains difficult for the Americans. But it is becoming fatal for the Japanese system that must sustain a prolonged defense. In an American command post on Leyte, officers mark fresh positions on maps and recalculate the next phase. They are tired, mud-covered, and careful not to celebrate too early. They know Japanese resistance will continue. They know the campaign inland will be brutal, but the naval shield has held, the air umbrella remains active, and the ground line is expanding. The mockery that once followed American commanders in Japanese conversations now has to survive contact with results on Leyte. Results are measured in roads opened, guns landed, airstrips secured, and counterattacks broken. And the campaign is only beginning. The battle for Leyte settles into a rhythm that is worse than chaos, because it never truly ends. Rain comes in sheets, then mist, then rain again. Trails disappear under churned mud. Rivers rise without warning and swallow crossings built the day before. Men sleep in wet uniforms if they sleep at all. Rifles rust, boots rot. Food arrives late. Stretchers sink into the ground while medics and litter teams fight not only wounds, but exhaustion and disease. This is the battlefield Japanese commanders had expected to favor them. In part, it does. American columns bog down. Tanks struggle off the roads. Artillery has to be dragged into position by labor that burns out men as fast as combat does. Small units lose contact in jungle folds and low cloud. Progress inland is measured in ridgelines, villages, and river bends that look close on a map and take a day to reach under fire. But the same terrain that slows the Americans punishes Japanese reinforcement even more. The Japanese command commits more troops to Leyte, trying to turn the island into a decisive killing ground. Convoys move under threat. Barges creep through dangerous waters at night. Men land with limited supplies and are pushed toward the front through mountains and rain, often without enough food, often without reliable communications, often without the artillery support needed to break prepared positions. They arrive determined. They arrive hungry. They arrive into a battle the Americans are increasingly organizing faster than the Japanese can feed. On a muddy road near the center of the island, an American regimental staff watches traffic inch forward in both directions. Trucks carrying ammunition, jeeps with wire and radio batteries, ambulances with mud sprayed across their hoods, engineers moving timbers and bridging gear. Military police trying to prevent gridlock while shells fall somewhere beyond the next rise. It does not look dramatic. It looks like work. That work is what Japanese officers had mocked when they spoke of American commanders as men of machines and comfort. On Leyte, that machinery becomes endurance. A stalled advance gets a dozer, a flooded crossing gets engineers, a unit low on mortar rounds gets resupplied through rain and shell fire because someone 3 echelons back tracked tonnage, routes, and priorities. The front line feels the result in moments that decide survival. A battalion pinned near a ridgeline spends half a day trying to move against concealed Japanese positions. The defenders are well sighted, firing from reverse slopes and tree cover, forcing every approach into narrow lanes. Casualties rise. The assault companies flatten into mud behind thin cover while machine gun bursts whip leaves off branches overhead. Then the net closes. Forward observers work angles through breaks in cloud. Artillery batteries shift fire by timed sequence. Mortars bracket the crest. Fighter bombers appear when weather lifts just enough to attack visible strong points and suspected supply tracks. Infantry platoons move again under that cover. Slower, bloodied, but no longer alone in the fight. By dusk, the ridge is taken. The cost is real. Bodies lie where the slope steepened and men had to stand to climb. Medics move until dark and beyond. Engineers start cutting a path for ammunition mules and hand-carry teams before the ground is even fully secured. Japanese survivors pull back to the next line. This pattern repeats across Leyte. Japanese troops fight hard, counterattack hard, and hold difficult ground with discipline. Yet each local success strains a system already cracking. Ammunition is short. Medical care is overwhelmed. Air attack and naval control make movement dangerous. Reinforcements reach the island but cannot be concentrated cleanly enough or sustained long enough to produce the decisive blow Tokyo wants. Inside Japanese headquarters, language changes. Early confidence gives way to urgency, then to grim arithmetic. How many troops remain effective? How much rice can be moved? Which roads are still passable? Which units have radios that still work? Which commanders can counterattack and which can only delay? The Americans are not advancing everywhere at once, and they are not unstoppable. They make mistakes. They get lost. They suffer heavily in the mud and on the ridges. But they keep connecting land operations to sea supply and air support. And that connection keeps rebuilding their momentum after every slowdown. Japanese contempt for American land command begins to die in reports written by officers who have watched coordinated fire. Logistics and persistence grind down position after position. On Leyte, the battle is no longer about whether the Americans can be stopped at the beaches. It is about how long the Japanese can keep an army alive on an island where the sea and sky belong to the enemy. Leyte does not end the campaign for the Philippines. It proves the method that will finish it. As the fighting on Leyte grinds on through mud, disease, and attrition, American commanders are already looking ahead. The objective is larger than one island. The Philippines is a chain, a battlefield spread across sea lanes, airfields, ports, mountain roads, and cities. To break Japanese power here, the next blows must land where they can shatter command, logistics, and maneuver at the same time. That means Luzon. In Japanese headquarters, General Tomoyuki Yamashita faces the reality that many in Tokyo had delayed admitting. The Americans have not simply returned, they have returned with a system. Ground forces are not operating as isolated formations, waiting to be rescued by naval victories that never come. They are advancing under a shield and a pipeline, supplied by sea, protected by air, and erected with increasing confidence by commanders who learn fast and strike again before the defender can recover. The old mockery sounds foolish now. When the next major American landings come on Luzon, the opening feels familiar in all the worst ways for the Japanese side. Naval gunfire tears at coastal defenses. Aircraft range far beyond the beaches. hitting roads, depots, and movement routes before troops can concentrate. Landing waves come in not as a gamble, but as part of a rehearsed machine that keeps feeding men and material ashore. On the ground, American units move inland with caution and force. They are no longer proving themselves. They are exploiting what they have already proven. A Japanese staff officer on Luzon studies incoming reports and sees the same pattern that broke hopes on Leyte. Local resistance can delay. Counterattacks can hurt. Terrain can slow. But every hour favors the Americans if the line is not broken early. Their artillery grows. Their roads improve. Their aircraft range wider. Their naval support remains available. Every day the Japanese fail to destroy the lodgment. The lodgment becomes harder to destroy. Yamashita makes a hard choice rooted in reality, not pride. He cannot throw his forces into a single dramatic battle near Manila and expect victory against overwhelming American superiority in sea and air power. Instead, he disperses and withdraws major forces into defensive zones, especially the mountains of northern Luzon, aiming to prolong resistance and inflict losses while preserving what combat strength he can. It is a professional decision under impossible conditions. It also confirms how completely the strategic initiative has passed. American commanders push through central Luzon toward major objectives while separate battles erupt in towns, river crossings, and ridge lines. Infantrymen move house to house in shattered districts and then, days later, climb into hills where every switchback might hold a machine gun. Tank crews support advances where roads allow and wait in frustration where rubble and terrain deny movement. Engineers bridge streams under sniper fire. Medical units clear aid stations and then move them forward again because the front does not stay still for long. The coordination that Japanese generals once dismissed now shows its full weight across an entire theater. A platoon in contact can call for artillery and get it. A division blocked by terrain can reroute with engineering support. A Japanese concentration spotted from the air can be struck before it attacks. A naval force offshore can still influence fighting inland through fire support and supply flow. Command is no longer just who gives the bravest order. It is who can connect action, information, and sustainment faster than the enemy can adapt. Japanese troops continue to fight with determination in countless positions, from urban strongpoints to mountain defenses. Their resistance is often fierce and costly to overcome. But courage cannot replace fuel. Skill cannot replace ammunition. Discipline cannot replace secure sea lanes. The American campaign keeps compressing Japanese options until tactical stubbornness becomes strategic isolation. In command posts across the Philippines, American officers read the maps differently now than they did before Leyte. They still mark enemy positions, road conditions, and weather fronts. They still worry about casualties and overextension. But they no longer need to wonder whether their combined command structure can beat Japanese field leadership on land. That question has been answered in mud, surf, and mountain stone. The answer is being written again on Luzon, for Japanese generals who once saw American land commanders as inexperienced men carried by ships and planes. The truth is now impossible to ignore. The ships and planes were never a crutch. They were part of the command. And in the Philippines, that command is taking the islands back one road, one ridge, and one shattered headquarters at a time. By the final phase of the campaign, the outcome is no longer hidden behind weather, distance, or hope. It is visible in the broken roads, the abandoned guns, the empty depots, and the faces of men who still fight because orders, duty, and survival leave them no other path. Across the Philippines, Japanese forces are cut apart by geography and by the steady pressure of American combined operations. Some units hold mountain positions for months. Others are driven from towns, ports, and airfields that once tied the archipelago together. Communications collapse in places into runners and rumor. Rations shrink. Ammunition is hoarded. Wounded men are left where they fall because there are not enough medics, not enough transport, not enough time. The Americans pay for every advance. Infantry companies are reduced and rebuilt, then reduced again. Patrols disappear into thick ground and return at half strength, or not at all. Engineers work under fire until their hands bleed. Artillery crews fire until barrels wear and ears ring long after the guns stop. Pilots launch in bad weather and come back to damaged strips and exhausted mechanics. Sailors keep supply lines running through submarine threat, storms, and the endless burden of feeding a campaign spread across islands. But the difference remains what it was on the first day at Leyte. American commanders in the Philippines are not fighting one battle at a time in isolation. They are conducting a campaign in layers. Ground forces seize and hold. Naval forces move and sustain. Air forces strike, scout and isolate. Intelligence improves. Logistics expands. Even where the front stalls, the system keeps working. And while it works, Japanese positions become weaker whether they are attacked that hour or not. For the Japanese High Command, the loss of the Philippines is more than a territorial defeat. It is the collapse of a strategic shield. Sea routes are severed. Reinforcement becomes fantasy. The ability to coordinate major operations across the southern and central reaches of the empire is crippled beyond repair. Officers who once mocked American land leadership now issue reports defined by shortage, withdrawal, and attrition. The contempt is gone. In its place is recognition. Too late to matter. General Yamashita continues resistance in northern Luzon as long as possible, preserving a field force under impossible supply conditions and forcing the Americans to fight for every valley and approach. His soldiers remain dangerous. Their defenses in mountain terrain exact real cost. Yet even this prolonged resistance cannot reverse the central fact. The campaign has already been decided by the failure to break the American return and by the American ability to keep integrating sea, air, and land power faster than Japan can respond. In ruined command posts and captured documents, the story appears in fragments. Misjudged intentions, underestimated commanders, overconfidence in terrain, faith that American land operations would unravel once separated from the sea war. But in the Philippines, there was no separation. The men coming ashore at Leyte had brought the sea war and the air war with them, and their commanders knew how to use all of it, as fighting tapers in some sectors and continues bitterly in others. Soldiers on both sides move through landscapes transformed by bombardment and rain. Villages are splintered. Roads are craters and mud. Airfields are scars cut into the earth. Palm groves are blackened stumps. The campaign leaves behind not only victory and defeat, but exhaustion beyond easy words. And still, when the history of the Philippines campaign is reduced to headlines, the deepest lesson remains in what Japanese generals got wrong at the start. They mistook American coordination for dependence. They mistook method for weakness. They mistook patience for inexperience. On the beaches of Leyte and in the mountains of Luzon, those mistakes were answered by commanders who synchronized ships, aircraft, guns, engineers, and infantry into a relentless campaign that Japan could not stop. The mocking ended first. Then the Philippines were lost.